Marco Muzzo, who killed 3 children and their grandfather, unlikely to drive drunk again, parole board decides. Muzzo was handed a 10-year sentence after pleading guilty in 2016 to 4 counts of impaired driving causing death. And there's what the creep looks like. Marco Muzzo. A Toronto area drunk driver who killed 3 children and their grandfather was granted day parole this week because the board found he had become more self-aware in the years since the crash and was unlikely to reoffend. But in its written decision released on Thursday, the Parole Board of Canada says it denied Marco Muzzo full parole because elements of his plan for self-management are relatively simplistic and rely too much on his circumstances. It says Muzzo has completed psychological and addictions counseling since he was denied parole 2 years ago and has made good progress, but it notes the decision to tackle his substance use appears to have been spurred by the prospect of parole. Muzzo will be released to a halfway house and must abide by certain conditions. He was handed a 10-year sentence after pleading guilty in 2016 to 4 counts of impaired driving causing death and 2 of impaired driving causing bodily harm in the crash that killed 9-year-old Daniel Neville Lake, his 5-year-old brother Harrison, their 2-year-old sister Millie, and the children's 65-year-old grandfather, Gary Neville. The children's grandmother and great-grandmother were also seriously injured in the September 2015 collision in Vaughan, Ontario. The decision addressed to Muzzo says since then he has worked to better himself. Yeah, right. Your understanding of your drinking pattern and underlying issues has evolved over time. It essentially took the index offenses to make you stop and evaluate your use of alcohol in a way that you admit you'd never done before, it reads. So what, he had to kill 4 people and put 2 more people in the hospital before he realized he had a problem? Anyways, back to the article. But it notes that the parole decision should not be read as a treatise on his character. The board remains mindful that your selfish ways of thinking directly led to the senseless death of 4 innocent people, and this risk-based decision does not detract from that awareness. It says there are numerous factors that make Muzzo unlikely to reoffend, including support from his parole officer and a commitment from his addictions counselor to continue treatment upon his release. The board notes that you have a strong community network with many family members, friends, and co-workers actively expressing their support for you. Your fiancé is known to be a strong support and has continued to visit you often and participated in daily phone calls, the decision reads. You have mostly lived a pro-social and productive life. However, the decision says day parole is a better fit for Muzzo than full parole because it will allow him more supervision to test his newfound knowledge. You will likely face serious reintegration stressors upon release, the decision reads. You'll have to demonstrate your ability to deal with your stress adequately prior to consideration for full parole. So the board has barred Muzzo from entering the city of Brampton, the King City community, or the town of Aurora without permission from his parole officer. The Neville Lake family lives in Brampton, and there are memorials to the victims in the other 2 communities. which the board says the family should be able to visit without fear of seeing Muzzo. Muzzo is also not allowed to drink or go to bars, the parole board decided. The Neville Lake children's mother, Jennifer Neville Lake, announced the parole decision on Tuesday before the reasons were released. She said the outcome doesn't change anything for her. No matter what happened today, Daniel, Harry, and Millie won't get to come back home. My dad isn't coming home to my mom, she wrote in a Facebook post. And I'm just reading on another article here. Muzzo's release plan is to work as a general laborer for his family's construction company while staying in an approved halfway house. He must abstain from alcohol and stay out of bars or clubs where the sale of alcohol is their primary source of income. So, you know what's not fair to me and most other people? Is that this piece of trash, this piece of garbage, this subhuman, this douchebag murderer gets to get out on day parole and go to work and live his life outside of jail, at least during the daytime for now, like get some freedom to go out and enjoy society. But 3 children under 10 and their 65-year-old grandfather won't get a second chance at life because he murdered all 4 of them. And not to mention the children's grandmother and great-grandmother ended up in the hospital seriously injured. And not to mention that the family that he stole those people from, like the mother of the children, the father of the children, all their families and family members and friends won't get to see those children anymore, or grandfather. The only time they'll get to visit anything to do with them is when they're visiting their gravesite. Why does this piece of garbage, why does this douchebag get a second chance when none of his victims will? First of all, impaired driving causing death, to me that's a BS charge. I think if you drive drunk, if you drive while intoxicated, in other words, you drive while you're intoxicated by alcohol or drugs, even if the drugs that you're intoxicated by is something as simple as cough syrup or antihistamines. If you drive while you're impaired and you kill people while doing that, the sentence should be an automatic life in jail with no chance of parole ever. It should be automatic that you do life in jail with no chance of parole ever. No judge should be allowed to overrule that sentence. It should be black and white. If you get convicted of impaired driving causing death, it should be first-degree murder, and it should be an automatic life sentence. No parole or any other luxuries like that. Marco Muzzo, he deserves an Academy Award for the way he's acted since committing these heinous crimes. I remember during, I think it was 2016, I believe, it was when he was convicted of these charges and sentenced to jail. He basically read a statement to the court, to the judge and everyone present in court of how remorseful he is and yada, yada, yada. I can't remember the exact wording, but basically it sounded so rehearsed, so fake. Like it sounded like a script for a soap opera or something. I don't know. Like it just sounded like a script for a movie or a TV show. sounded so fake. And now he's pretended that he understands the wrongs he's committed and what a negative impact it's had on society, and he's not going to do wrong anymore. Yeah, right. And back when he drove drunk, like, just to remind everyone, he's some stupid little rich kid who comes from a construction family. His parents own a construction company in the Toronto area. I don't know the name of the company, but they own a construction company in the Toronto area that's worth almost $2 billion, or at least at the time, back in 2015, it was worth almost $2 billion. So he's grown up as a spoiled little rich kid. So he and his buddy were on their way back from Miami after going to a bachelor party. They flew back on their private jet, probably drinking the whole way as well too. And when he got back to the Toronto area and it was time to make his way home from the airport, instead of doing the right thing and taking a taxi or taking an Uber, or if possible, if available, taking public transit, no. He decided to selfishly drive drunk. He drove his Porsche Cayenne SUV. Apparently, he was doing 160 kilometers an hour in an 80 kilometer an hour zone. So that's the equivalent of doing 100 miles an hour in a 50 mile an hour zone. Blew through a stop sign and struck the minivan, killing these 4 people and putting 2 more people in the hospital in critical condition. Like, he's obviously a very selfish bastard. This guy was worth enough money that he could have taken a damn helicopter home from the airport and had this helicopter land in front of his house or behind his house if he wanted to, provided there's enough space for a helicopter to get him home. I mean, money was no issue for him at all. You know, if a cab ride costs $50 or $60 for the average person, to the average person, that's an expensive cab ride. To someone like him, that basically represents like pocket change that you might find in the bottom of your cup holder in your car. No, he decided to make the selfish decision to drive drunk instead and murder a bunch of people. I know that according to the Criminal Code of Canada, they call it impaired driving causing death. In my eyes, I call it murder. This is the mother of the victim, Jennifer Neville Lake.
Muzzo has accepted full responsibility and accountability for his conduct and the devastating consequences of that conduct. As you now know, on February 4th, his acceptance of responsibility will be expressed by his pleas of guilty to various charges.
So, we're cautiously optimistic about what happened today, that February 4th we'll hear a plea. If it's a guilty plea, then that, in my understanding, acknowledges that he's the reason our children aren't here. So throughout this whole process, and my dad too, throughout this whole process, there's been no, the mention of them has not really occurred. And the reason we're here and the reason that other families is because other families like ours are missing family members is because of someone else's actions. We have been utterly decimated by this. We make a point of getting up every day. But that time, my day used to start at 5 a.m. I'm still getting up at 5 a.m., but I'm not getting out of bed. I'm just sitting there staring at, the pictures of my children, listening for them, hoping I'll hear them. And we don't. So there's nothing. So guilty just means that I could stay and not move for, days on end.
So we can see, it's obvious that that mother and father, that they're utterly devastated. Like anyone who loses family members like that would be utterly devastated. And, they might never be the same again. All I can say is anyone who knows the Neville Lake family, the parents of those victims that were murdered in that case, give them whatever support and love you're able to give them. They need all the support and love and assistance that's available to them. Just offer to be there for them and show your support for them and all that. And as for that piece of garbage, Marco Muzzo, who does not deserve to be out of jail, so you've heard the conditions. He's not allowed in Brampton, Ontario, King City, Ontario, or Aurora, Ontario. He's not allowed to drink, and he's not allowed to be inside of any establishments where their primary source of income is from alcohol sales. So let's do what we should do as a responsible society. If you spot that douchebag anywhere where he's not supposed to be, call the police and let them know. Call the police and let them know that Marco Muzzo is breaching his day parole. This piece of garbage deserves to spend the rest of his life in jail. Nothing less. I don't know why he was only sentenced to 10 years in jail, and at this point, after only serving maybe about 4.5 years in jail. Initially, at first, when he was initially arrested, his bail was set at $1 million, which is pocket change for a family worth $1.7 billion. And he was initially released on bail. So this guy has spent less than 5 years in jail, is already getting day parole, even though he deserves to spend life in jail. Well, if I hear about him screwing up, doing anything that he's not supposed to be doing, you better believe I'm going to do another video about it. And I say this now from the bottom of my heart to anyone who happens to be currently driving while intoxicated, or anyone who's even thinking of driving while intoxicated. If you decide to drive while you're intoxicated by alcohol or drugs, even if it's perfectly legal medicine, I don't care if it's cough medicine or antihistamines that you're taking. Any medicine that you take, if it says on the package of that medicine, do not drive or operate heavy machinery while taking this medicine, then follow those instructions. Don't drive or operate any heavy machinery. Only worthless douchebags go jeopardizing the rest of the general public by driving impaired. So from the bottom of my heart, if you're stupid enough to drive impaired from this moment on, I sincerely hope from the bottom of my heart that you either drive into a nice big tree and kill yourself, or drive over a cliff and kill yourself. I sincerely mean that. I really hope if you're stupid enough to drive impaired, that you drive into a nice big tree or drive off a cliff and kill yourself. Because if you're stupid and selfish enough to drive while you're impaired, as far as I'm concerned, you deserve to be dead. And if that sounds a little bit harsh for me to say, so be it. You're either with the law-abiding public or you're with the impaired drivers. You can't be with both. If you're a decent person, you're with the law-abiding public. If you're not a decent person, you decide to drive impaired, I really hope that you die.